It's Friday, September 13th, 2019, and this, well, it's your Daily Detroit. I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Cheyenne Oserini. The weekend's almost here, everybody.
Woo, that's exciting.
It is. First step, a story really close to my heart. We told you that the Grand Hotel has been sold to a private equity firm. Well, Sven did some follow-up and has more information.
Second, Fletcher Sharpe joins me to talk all things Detroit City FC after a major win against a top Mexican team. Surprising outcome.
And third, it's the 100th anniversary of the Waldorf schools. They focus on creativity and the arts as part of learning, and Detroit's has a long history. Educator Justin Trombly joins us to talk about it. Let's get right to it right after this.
Daily Detroit is brought to you by Repurpose. Repurpose is where you can get hired by Detroit's best startups and companies. Repurpose connects top talent like you, yes, you, with purpose-driven companies based on values, experience, culture fit. Join their talent community at repurpose.co. That's repurpose.co. The show is also brought to you by our Patreon members like you. Thank you for your support, and get on the bus at dailydetroit.com/join. Earlier this week, we told you about the breaking news that the world-famous Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island will be sold to a private equity firm based in Denver. We had tried to get an interview with a couple people who'd be in the know from the island, but two potential suitors fell through for us. But Sven, I know you have thoughts about this, and you wanted to get on the air anyway.
That's right. So just to set the table, I worked on the island for 5 seasons. I worked like full seasons as well. Got to know a lot of the personalities up there. So I have a little bit of a familiarity for what it's worth. And I feel like I got to know the island pretty well. In a way, I guess I'm not surprised that the interviews fell through. I think, one of the things about Mackinac, and I mentioned it the other day on the show, is that it's a really small, tight-knit community. One of the results of that is people really, there's kind of an aversion to airing dirty laundry. I think people are pretty leery of being seen as stepping on each other's toes up there, because it's a small island, right?
Yeah, but you still were able to talk to folks on background.
Absolutely. And look, it's always, just kind of speaking more broadly, it's always uncomfortable when there's news like this. I mean, nobody likes change, especially for a place like Mackinac Island, which is basically all about resisting change and kind of stepping into the past in a sense. I mean, it clings tightly to its Victorian era cultures. There are no automobiles allowed. Everything's by horse and carriage or bicycle. There are, incredibly strict zoning laws for all the buildings and everything up there. But, there are, so we're talking with some of my friends who are still up there. There's a pretty pervasive belief that Dan Musser III, he's the CEO of the hotel now, that his family, frankly, just wasn't interested in running the hotel after he's done. Musser is 55. He's not super old, but he's old enough that he's probably looking at retirement. And, I would also point out that running a business, a seasonal business up on Mackinac Island is really difficult. And it requires a lot of personal sacrifice. I mentioned that, there are basically 4 or 5 big families up there who own most of everything. Most of them own, more than one thing. Like they own like a hotel, and then they might own like a bike rental place. They might own a fudge shop, a carriage livery, etc. It means moving twice a year, essentially, for most of these families. It means, if you have kids, then it means you have to find them, you have to put them in school. I mean, most of the business owners don't live on the island year round, so they're putting their kids in school somewhere on the mainland. And then, you've got to uproot every spring to go up to the island to open up the businesses and brush off winter and get everything ready for the grueling tourist season. It's hard work, it's a lot of personal sacrifice. There is a thought that the Mussers basically got an offer that was just too good to refuse. He told the Free Press in a follow-up story that the hotel was never technically listed for sale and that they had offers over the years, sure, as I'm sure a lot of the businesses had, but they've always basically told them no. The Mackinac Island Town Crier reported that the word about the sale, that the hotel was for sale, had been, kind of floating around for as much as a month, but there were no details until the announcement came out. They also said that, Musser will stay on as chairman for at least 3 years. The Musser family is going to retain their summer residence on the island. There are no plans to change the staff. And they also pointed out that the new operator is an entity called Pivot Hotels and Resorts, which has they'll manage it for KSL Capital Partners, which is the private equity firm that's buying the Grand.
And there's some names in there that are known by folks.
Yeah, so this hotel operator already operates and manages some properties that are going to be familiar to a lot of people in Michigan, including the Inn at Bay Harbor in Petoskey, which is another up north luxury property. So they're sort of familiar with that demographic and everything. They manage the Henry in Dearborn at the Henry Ford, the Amway Grand Plaza over in Grand Rapids, and the St. Clair Inn. I think what's really interesting and sort of left unanswered about all of this, though, is whether this is going to kind of be like the first domino to fall in a way. Like, are other Mackinac family, scions going to basically look at the Grand Hotel example and decide, you know what? That sounds like a pretty good deal. I'm going to sell out to an outside business interest.
Well, we really don't know the price, but I've got to imagine it's got to be a pretty penny to get something like this. And if you look at that number, it's really hard to turn that away. If you look at it, you're saying, 55 years old, not retiring yet, but that's, 10 years down the line. You can create a great legacy for your family that way.
Right. I mean, and a lot of these families up there are aging, the family matriarchs or patriarchs who are running things are aging. There's not always, it's not always clear who is going to take over for them or whether they have succession plans in place. Maybe they're just tired and looking for a break. I mean, like I said, tourism's it's a tough business. Factor in the weather up there and everything. I mean, those properties are closed all winter long. They take a huge beating from the elements up there in the wintertime. I mean, they spend a lot of money on upkeep of those properties because sometimes they look pretty rough after a long winter.
But I got to tell you, it's always beautiful every time I go up there. They always do a great job on that island.
That's the one thing about Mackinac Island that will for sure never change.
Joining us in the studio is our man to talk about all things soccer or, well, football in the rest of the world, Fletcher Sharpe. Welcome to Daily Detroit, my man.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So normally we wouldn't do a segment about a non-league friendly match involving our beloved Le Rouge, but Saturday night makes a very compelling exception. City entertained Club Atlas, a team from Guadalajara, Mexico that plays in Mexico's top league, Liga MX. And they came away with a shocking 2-1 win behind goals from Ryan Peterson and Yazid Matthews. So, Fletcher, Sven told me he was working one of the bars for Saturday's game, and his coworkers reacted in complete shock. They were surprised when City scored the first goal and came away with the win. Were you also surprised?
Not because they scored. It was more from the play. When Ryan Peterson got the ball, it looked like he was trying to pass it to someone and then last second turned to shoot. And it kind of caught everyone off guard. It was a great goal from the left wing, and it found its way into the left corner, just barely. And even the Atlas players, I know one of them, I can't remember his number, but I know as he saw it go in, he turned around, put his hands on his head, oh my God, is this really happening? So it's given the fact that Detroit is now a third level on the U.S. professional scale, and Club Atlas is Liga MX, the top scale in Mexico, and typically the Mexican professional teams are better than the U.S. It's kind of a shock. It's kind of, I guess, in a way, if the Toledo Mud Hens hit a home run off of the Houston Astros.
Yeah, if Justin Verlander gave up a home run to the Mud Hens or in fact, even a double-A ball team.
Yeah.
Because their Mud Hens are triple-A.
Yeah, I forgot the double-A ball team.
I mean, there's so many. I used to be a baseball umpire, so there's so many leagues. But, speaking of that, a lot of people speculated that this was Atlas's B team. Is that true?
Yes and no. They brought their entire team, not everyone, because obviously something in Mexican league that's not in the U.S. leagues. When Mexican teams give you a number, whether you're on the A team, B team, C team, youth team, whatever, you get to keep the number. So if there's some 14-year-old who wants to wear number 10, he can't because the guy on the top team has to wear it. So he gets number 230. They all wear triple-digit numbers. So they had players who were single digits, 10, 11, 12, top numbers. They had people in triple digits. So they had their entire...
So you can actually tell that from the uniforms. Okay.
They had two players there who were number 140-something and number 230-something. So those are people they signed to youth contracts to the top team who were they're just trying to get a run out for. So they had some top people. They had some not top people. And as the game started, it was mainly mainly kind of B team, C teamers, but they had a few starters in there. But as the game wore on and got later towards the end, they started putting in like their starting center mid, their starting defender, their starting forward, because they wanted to try to get this game back from 2-1 to 2-2 and try to tie it up.
Well, it's kind of impressive that they held them to only one score. How did they do that?
City played tight defense early. Well, first early, they played kind of a back and forth game. After Atlas scored right after they scored their first goal, they kind of were like, all right, we gotta kind of leave our defense kind of further back to make sure we can counterattack, because skill-wise, Atlas might be better, but if we give enough effort to get back, we should be okay. And after Yazid Matthews scored this gorgeous volley, the ball came in from the right wing. Another City player missed it, although he would try to claim like I purposely missed it so it'd fall. Yazid Matthews caught it with the inside of his right foot, put it in the top corner to give him 2-1 lead. About 5-10 minutes after that happened, City's team parked the bus essentially. I don't mean all the way, but for people, parking the bus means when you put all of your players defensively, save for your forwards, and you make sure that whoever beats you has to beat all 8 or 9 of your players getting in towards your goalie. And they did a really good job of that. There are a few times where Atlas were able to get a few passes in there, but as soon as a player touched the ball inside of the box to try to shoot, there was already 2 people on him. So like the ball got nowhere near the net. And Atlas got frustrated to the point to where they started shooting from like 25, 30 yards out, which just won't work at Keyworth because it's just not, no one's ever scored a goal from that far out. I think maybe one person played for Milwaukee, and that happened because a goalie just wasn't in the net.
So one of the reasons why this was so surprising to people, as this win came the day after the U.S. men's national team was just drubbed 3-0 right here in the United States to Mexico. MLS teams routinely lose to Liga MX clubs in interleague tournaments, and MLS, well, I mean, it's generally seen as inferior to the Mexican League. You kind of talked about that. Did this win garner much attention from like the wider soccer press?
Somewhat. I think they were more focused on the game that followed. Oakland Roots played another Mexican side team. Oakland Roots is a part of NISA, which is the league Detroit City FC is going to be joining.
You mentioned them before on the show a couple times. Pretty impressive club.
I love them because the way they're doing stuff the proper way, there's like maybe two or three proper ways to do it. Detroit City's doing one of the ways, which is just building from ground roots, getting what you can, bringing in engagement. Oakland Roots is doing another proper way. They're still building ground roots, but they're signing a lot of players who are well known in the Oakland scene who might not have gone on, or they're getting some professional players to come back who are really good, who might have done something in the area, and their branding is like really great, and it's like a big oak tree with like rainbow colors to show the unity of, and I'm like, that's great. They had a really good lineup. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm fairly certain they got down 3-0 early to a Liga MX team, which kind of made people look more at Detroit's game like, oh, not everyone in this level is beating these teams. Not that people expect them to, because Liga MX is supposed to be the paragon of North American soccer. But yeah, I mean, it was, when people looked at it, it wasn't because of the U.S.-Mexico game. Most people expected to lose to Mexico. Most people expected to lose 3-0 to Mexico, because Mexico has a wide range of talent they can bring in, and Detroit and the U.S. is still trying to find themselves in terms of the national level.
So was this a fluke or a statement win in your opinion?
A little bit of both. I'm not going to lie, and I'm sure I'm going to catch some heat for this. Ryan Peterson's goal, the first one, I'm sure he meant to try to shoot eventually, but it did not look like he was going to do that at all. It looked like last second said, I'm going to try to flick this into the net, and it went in.
It worked.
It did. And as a forward who plays soccer, like, all goals are goals, even if they're mistakes. Even if it's off your face, if it's off your butt, if it's off whatever, it's a goal. Yazid Matthews' goal, same way. Pretty skillful. A little bit lucky to get the ball down. Pretty skillful. Detroit took it to them. They took it to them when they could. They didn't just sit back the whole game. They sat back maybe part of it near the end. I'd say it's a bit of 50-50, which is kind of the sport as it is. The sport kind of relies on like you needing to like have the skill, but also have some luck. I would say it's a statement game though, in the sense that Detroit really has become professional. While they did have some really good players during their NPSL season, there was some worry if some of the players they would bring in, while they're supposed to be professional players, would be able to maintain their spots. Because there were some players they brought in to play during the NPSL season who were getting outplayed by kids in college, which is good for the NPSL season, but kind of makes you worry if the backup here is someone you're paying money to, or going to be paying money to. He's getting outplayed by a sophomore. Makes you kind of nervous. But those fears have been alleviated so far because since Detroit has become a professional team, they've looked sharp. They've looked crisp. The head coach has them doing exactly what he needs them to do. The players are playing the same exact way they were during the season. If you replace the names with different names, but the same positions, they're still moving the ball the way they're supposed to. So it's really great to see. So it's a statement win in that way, but it's still kind of lucky because I think if they play 9 out of 10 times, Atlas probably wins the other 9 times.
All right. Well, City returns to NPSL Members Cup action on Saturday at the Milwaukee Torrent. Thoughts?
Long story short, Milwaukee used to not be a very great NPSL team. They tried, they did their best, but they either found their ways to get some weird red card they shouldn't have, or they just got drubbed by teams. So when they decided to take the year off to work on some professional aspirations, I found it kind of weird because in my head, typically you go from being bad to being good on a lower level. Then you go from being good on a lower level to working towards being professional and that way. But in American soccer, you can just pay into the professional rank, and whether you're good or not doesn't really matter. So when I found out they were going to be in the Founders Cup, the first part of it, was a little surprised. So far, they've played okay. They've replaced some of their bad players with some bit better players. They've kept some of their bad players. They've kept maybe 1 or 2 of their good players. So this should be a game City should win. They won't run away, I don't think, but I think they should be able to maintain the 3-1, 2-0 win.
All right. Fletcher Sharpe, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Waldorf Education is celebrating its 100th birthday later this month. Here in Detroit, they operate the Detroit Waldorf School. They'll be celebrating September 19th with a block party on Burn Street over there in Indian Village. Joining us to talk all about that and the Detroit Waldorf School is Justin Trombly. He's a 4th grade teacher at the Detroit Waldorf School. Justin, welcome to Daily Detroit.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so give us your background. You're a 4th grade teacher there. How long have you been with the Detroit Waldorf School?
This will be my 4th year here in Detroit, but I've been working in other Waldorf schools that you can find them all over the place for the last 16 years. And I just started this week with my 4th graders, a group of children who I started with in 1st grade, and will be teaching them all the way until they graduate after 8th grade.
Is that how it works there? You basically stay with the same class throughout their schooling?
Yeah,
there?
1st through 8th grade is the ideal. Obviously, it doesn't always work out quite that way, but that's our goal.
So my family's from the East Side. I'm familiar with the Waldorf concept, but for people at home, it's a different experience than like your traditional public school, and not just because it's from a different organization, but from the ground up, it's a different experience. What are some of the things that set Waldorf apart?
Yeah, so we're the only independently run school left in the city of Detroit. We stuck through some really hard times in the city, and we offer an education that's based in the arts. And so we have a rigorous academic curriculum, but it's supported all throughout by artistic activities, music, painting, drawing, sculpture, movement. So the kids get a really well-rounded education.
And so how is it different than like traditional public school arts education?
Well, we're not subject to the state demands, standardized testing that's going on.
My son was just complaining yesterday about the standardized test he had to take, and he said they were he's a pretty good reader, but he was complaining that they were giving him words that he'd never seen before.
Yeah. So while we don't have to follow those things, it's helpful as a teacher because you don't have to be teaching to that test all the time, and the teachers are left with a little more freedom to sculpt the curriculum for the kids who are actually in front of them and what they need. So that's one difference.
Because Waldorf was founded, just for our listeners, by Rudolf Steiner, who was an artist and a scientist, I think, in Germany back in 1919. And he was the founder of something called anthroposophy.
Yeah.
I have no idea what that is.
Well, that was his worldview coming out of World War I. A lot of people were searching for a new way for Europe to move forward as a society. And so those were his thoughts about how society could be built. And Waldorf education is just one offshoot of that. He also developed a whole new form of agriculture, medicine, finances, and the education was one thing that came out of that worldview. And so, the first Waldorf school opened 100 years ago this month in Germany. And since then, it has spread around the world. There's over 1,200 schools and I believe 2,000 initiative kindergartens, and it's one of the fastest growing educational movements in the entire world. And yeah, you mentioned that Rudolf Steiner was an artist and a scientist, and that's really something we try to bring together, the science and the arts in our curriculum.
So I've had some family that have gone to Waldorf schools. One of the things that's key from what they taught me is that Waldorf is one of those places where you learn how to learn, which is useful throughout your entire lifetime as opposed to just learning a specific fact. And I think about what many intelligent people have said over the years is that specific facts, yes, they're important, but you can find them. You don't store them necessarily all in your brain. The key is to learn how to learn, to always be open to new experiences and create new things. And when I think about how the economy is changing, what sets people apart is more than just the rote tasks. It's about creativity. It's about problem solving. What about the day-to-day for Waldorf kind of like enables that? Because I never had the chance to go to Waldorf.
Yeah, so I mean, we're seeing that more and more as kids go out into the world. The graduates from Waldorf School are being very successful in areas that maybe they wouldn't get direct training for that at the Waldorf School, but because they have this love of learning that you alluded to, they're able to really follow the paths that they want to afterwards because they're hungry for it and they want to learn.
I would be remiss to, if I didn't mention that, I mean, because you are a private school, Waldorf schools are a private school, it's not cheap. I mean, the tuition is not cheap. I was just looking it up before you came in does that affect kind of who you get? I mean, are these generally children of more affluent parents?
We also have a very wide socioeconomic group of people in our community. We do have a program called Accessible to All, which it makes it possible for anybody who wants to go to the school to come there if they really want to be there.
Does it offer like tuition assistance or something?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers, but we offer a lot of financial assistance. If you want to be at the school, you just need to come and talk to us.
Justin Trombly is a fourth grade teacher, or I guess you call it grades teacher.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I'll be a fourth grade teacher this year, and I'll be a fifth grade teacher next year.
You wear many hats, man.
There you go.
At the Detroit Waldorf School, Justin, thanks for coming into Daily Detroit.
Thank you very much for having me.
To celebrate the 100th anniversary, the children will be doing service projects with a variety of nonprofits like Gleaners Food Bank, Detroit Hives, D-Town Farms, Capuchin Soup Kitchen, Freedom House, St. Patrick's Church, and others. On Thursday, September 19th, there will be a block party on Burn Street in Indian Village at 11:30 in the morning. Students and families will gather for food, art, and music. And there will be a large t-shirt quilt on display made of Waldorf school shirts from around the world. And at 12:45 p.m., Waldorf students, parents, and teachers will gather to share stories about their service projects and perform an all-school Eurythmy piece. No, sadly, it's not the Eurythmics. Eurythmy is a real thing. It's rhythmical physical movements to music used to teach musical understanding or for therapy. You learn something new every day around here, Shai.
You sure do, Jer. All right, that'll do it for today's show. I'm Cheyenne Noserini.
For Randy Walker, thanks for the technical help getting us up and running and the nifty new iHeartRadio button on the website. Man, I had no idea it was going to be such a thing to be there. And for my indefatigable podcast partner, Sven Gustafson, I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit. Like, what do you think, Shai, if I just stopped the show and didn't do the See You Around Detroit? I think, would people melt down?
During Max Fun Drive, Biz and Teresa did a whole AMA style thing on Facebook. And one of the questions was, why did you change your let's call someone today woo? Because that's always what the bumper was.
Was this like a woo controversy?
It was a woo because they did a whole other musical bumper, which is fine, but people don't change, especially when you've been listening to the same podcast for the past 7 years for One Bad Mother. And they were like, well, we kind of felt like it was insensitive because sometimes we have really serious interviews.
So it's like those times where you come back from the story of somebody passing on. All of a sudden it's like, hey.
Yeah. So they were like, we just wanted to change it up. And most people were like, could you go back? And they were like, no.
no woo for you.
No woo for. I mean, they do a big woo at the beginning of the episode anyway, but still. So yeah, people don't like change. I think if you didn't put in take care of each other and we'll see you around Detroit, people will be like, what the heck is wrong with Jared? Are you okay? Do we need to send out a St. Bernard?